to be part of this meeting here, our first meeting of January. My other co-president, Anissa Bray, is out of town. She's in New York. So to my left here is Darius. He's our vice president, so he's going to be up here and helping me out tonight. Well, thank you, everybody, and I want to also thank Mike here at IATSE for letting us use this facility here tonight. It's a beautiful facility, and we really, really appreciate his support with that. And we also want to thank our sponsor for tonight. We have the Georgia Film Site as our sponsor for tonight's meeting. So if we could give them a round of applause. I also want to recognize our current past president who's here today, Lisa Farrell. And we'd also like to recognize, we have a brand new board for 2020, and we would like to recognize those members. And I'm going to toss that over to Darius so that he can read out the names. And whoever is here, if you wouldn't mind standing up or even coming up front here so that people can see who you are.
Yeah, it'd be great for you to come up front so we can get a photo as well of the new board. I know we did get one last month, but if we can get all of the new board members to come up first. Of course, we have the new co-presidents, two, Trish Taylor, am I right? And Anissa Bray, who's not here at this moment. We have two immediate past presidents, Clark Kofer, who's not here, and Lisa Farrell. You can come up, Ms. Farrell.
Yes, yeah, we need that.
We have a new secretary, Susan Moss Simmons. Our treasurer for her second term, Ms. Christy Claybaugh.
She's not here.
She's not here tonight either. For membership, we have two co-chairs. We have Leslie Green, who hasn't gotten here yet, and Kimberly Rabin, who also is not here yet. For internal governance, Ms. Melissa Goodman.
Yay, Melissa.
All right. Oh, okay. For industry and community relations, we have two co-chairmen, John Wilkins and Michael Jackson.
Hey, Michael.
And then for government relations, chair of that committee is Peter Stathopoulos. And incoming new chairperson for marketing and communications, Ms. Brianna Franklin. Our new volunteer coordinator, Alexis Bushell. Our new and incoming chairperson, chairman of education, Mr. Joe Williams. And our immediate past chair for education and now advisor, Linda Burns.
She's in Florida.
Yeah.
So this is your new incoming and some returning board members for GPP.
All right.
We're going to take a quick picture. Can you get us done?
All right, man, your frame? Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
One of those.
One of those will work.
I didn't get it out of all those shots. Thank you. They're used to it.
Well, this is the part of our meeting that everybody seems to love because we have a lot of production coming here to Georgia. And Lee Thomas couldn't make it tonight from the State Film Office, so our lovely past president will come up here, Lisa, and read the list for us. Yeah, come on up here.
Hi again, everybody.
Hi.
Okay, so I was just handed this list, so it's going to be a cold read. Okay, start with in prep we had Architect, a TV series on Disney Plus. Dead Silent season 4, TV series on Discovery. DMZ DC Comic, a TV pilot from the WB. What's this? Fruits of the Heart, a feature indie. And I think I should read y'all the dates too. From November 1st, 2019 to January 6th, 2020. Injustice with Nancy Grace, season 2, a reality series on Oxygen. It says from January 13th, 2020 to February 24th, 2020. Red Notice, studio feature from Netflix. I guess I started October the 9th, 2019, and it should be wrapping January 20th, 2020. Samaritan, a feature from MGM Studio. October the 8th is when they started, wrapping January the 20th. Toreko, a TV series on Netflix. Starting October, I think they're wrapping January 7th, 2020. The Titan Games, a reality TV show on NBC. Wrapping on January the 30th, 2020. Tyler Perry's Assisted Living, a TV pilot on BET Plus, wrapping January 22nd, 2020. Tyler Perry's House of Pain 2.0, season 1, TV series on BET Plus. Tyler Perry's Young Dylan, TV pilot on Nickelodeon. Vacation Friends, a feature from Fox Studio. Archer, season 11, TV series on FXX by Floyd County. Big Red, season 1, TV series on Disney Plus. Like Lightning, season 3, TV series on the CW. Council of Dads, season 1, TV series, and it doesn't tell me what network they're in production. Dish Nation, season 8, it's a reality series on Fox.
It's going.
We've got Doom Patrol, season 2, TV series on the WB. Dynasty, season 3, TV series on the CW. El Dorado, aka Suicide Squad, is a WB feature film. First 48, 2019 to 2020, a reality series on A&E. Genius, Aretha Franklin, TV series, National Geographic / Fox. Legacy, season 2, TV series on CW. Life by the Ton, TV reality series on Discovery. Love and Hip Hop Atlanta, season 9, reality series on VH1. Meet the Flockas, reality TV series on WeTV. OJ 25 on Court TV, reality series. Respect, aka Aretha, feature series MGM. Tag Team season 1, TV series Disney Marvel. The Aquarium, season 2, reality series on Animal Planet. The Resident, season 3, TV series on Fox. The Tomorrow War, aka Ghost Draft, is a feature from Paramount Studios. Uncensored, season 3, is a reality series on TV1. Underground Railroad is in production TV series on Amazon. And Wife Swap, season 2, a reality series on Paramount Network.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. That's amazing. I don't remember if I recognized Teresa Edwards. Did I recognize you, dear? This is our lovely videographer here for Terror Dome Entertainment, who's videotaping us. All right, we would like to call up Peter to give a quick report on government relations.
Hi everybody. So there were a lot of developments today. Let me back up. So there was an AJC article that came out today that probably a lot of y'all saw that was a little bit inflammatory. It was entitled State Gave Away Millions of Film Tax Credits That It Shouldn't Have. And it was based on the issuance of a process audit report that was completed by the Georgia Department of Audits. So this was asked for by somebody, nobody knows exactly who asked for this, but somebody in the Senate asked for this study a while back. They completed it. I actually read the whole thing. It was an interesting read. Basically, the audit found that there was some laxness at the Department of Economic Development, Department of Revenue, but I read it as kind of around the edges, nothing major. There was no major fraud or major waste there were some issues. So overall, I took the report as just, maybe the program needs a little mid-course adjustment or a little tightening. So the governor has not had a chance to respond to it, or anybody else in the government, so we're waiting on the governor's response to that audit. In addition, what we need to be aware of is there are a couple of return on investment studies that have been ordered to talk about the film tax credit program, meaning how economically strong or performing the program is. So one was prepared by Georgia Tech and one was prepared by the Georgia Department of Audits, and there may be another one, I'm not sure, but those are due to come out in the next couple days. Both of them are likely to be somewhat negative in terms of performance, but my experience with state impact studies is they tend to very narrowly focus on direct expenditures and an economic multiplier. So they typically don't capture a lot of the ancillary benefits of film tax programs, including property tax values going up from entire towns being revitalized by TV shows, all the ancillary jobs like mine. I don't work directly in production, but my livelihood's tied to the entertainment industry. Things like university enrollment, programs like CMII, the new University of Georgia Fine Art and Film program. So I think it's going to be our job as GPP to react to these studies and point out that they're very narrow and are missing a lot of the benefit. I didn't even talk about marketing benefits to Georgia, the logo, et cetera. So I think it's, a lot of things are going on. One, I think it's important we start a grassroots campaign and everybody contact their representative and talk about how important this credit program is to the entertainment industry, and remind them of the amazing success that we've had in Georgia over the last few years with this program, and that we want it to continue. And we're going to monitor the situation, see what Governor Kemp says about these studies. And our lobbyist, Louis Massey, is already doing a great job kind of front-running this. And we're going to be making some statements in the press, generally supportive. Trish helped today with some PR campaign. We're being helped by Jebra.
Yep.
So keep your eyes open and ears peeled. But in the meantime, let's start a grassroots effort. Tell everybody you know, tell your neighbors, tell your representatives that this program has really performed strongly in Georgia and did what it was supposed to do, and that we appreciate the legislature's prior support and continued support. Any questions about any of this?
Peter,
Yes, sir.
I would say that what you just said about getting it out with your local representative, you really don't have to say it 2 or 3 different times. It should resonate, because the industry has been strong for us here in Georgia, and not to take what you just said lightly. So a lot of times we hear something that goes back out the other ear. To go ahead and make that contact, and then your community and so forth. That's extremely important.
Thank you, Jim.
Yes, sir.
I didn't read the article, but did it say by how many hundreds of millions of dollars they were over, or was it?
I think it was in the tens of millions,
Okay.
which the Georgia Department of Revenue responded with, because what was great is there were response comments from the Department of Revenue, the Department of Economic Development, and the DOR response was, these are non-material numbers. You're talking about a $950 million a year program. So, a few million here and there over a space of, the period they looked at was a multi-year period, or I think it was just 16. But anyway, it was non-material, so nothing major.
Any other questions? All right, well, I appreciate that,
Thank you.
Peter. And yes, we are going to be vigilant, and we are going to keep our eye on what all is going out there. And please do call your representatives. One of GPP's main missions is what we're all about, is to keep that tax incentive in place and talk about and educate people about the importance of the tax incentive. It's basically what has brought all these productions here to Georgia. And if we didn't have that incentive, we wouldn't have anything to tax, basically. So it's very, very important, and it's very important to all of us here in this room for our jobs and other people that we know, their jobs. So thank you, Peter. We appreciate all your work that you did today and going forward. All right, Darius, I'm going to turn it over to you for a recap for our HIP party.
Yep. So speaking of fundraising, we have yearly 2 major fundraisers. Obviously, we're supported by our membership, and we want to thank you all for joining us for our last holiday industry party on December the 8th. Some of the recap information, it was a casino night. We used the casino as an opportunity for us to raise additional funds through the raffle that we had over the night. We had about 260 people in attendance. We were able to get 15 sponsors for the event, both in kind and cash sponsors. We raised $5,000 from the event, which is about on par from our past events, and we gave away 17 raffle items. And I wanted to thank our sponsors, our gold sponsors. Our presenting sponsor was Fulton Films, always very supportive of GPP and our events. Also, our gold sponsors were the Cab Entertainment Commission, TLC Rents and Classic Tents and Events, and we also got support from Oz Publishing, the Whitley Hotel, Atlanta Movie Tours, Atlanta Film Festival, and the food was catered by Baba Kebab, Barbecue, Southern Spoon, and Fuel Coffee.
Good job.
That's it.
Thanks, Darius. All right, we're going to move on to industry and community relations, and Michael Jackson, if you wouldn't, and John, if you wouldn't mind coming up and talking.
Hey, what's up, guys? Sorry I missed the introduction, John Owens. So we've got a great meeting. Thank you guys for being here. It's always tough to pack a room in January. Everybody's still working off the holidays. It's great to see you all. Michael's put together a great meeting today. It's going to be a two-parter. The second part for post-production will either be in February or March, depending on some big people we're possibly trying to get for February. Waiting to hear on that. So there will be a part two. Hope to see you all again when that happens in February or March. We are happy to announce that we are going to be able to continue the regional meeting program that was started in 2017 under Olinka Warner. And with the help of the film office, with their support, we'll be looking to take 4 meetings around the state to each corner. And we're pretty excited about that. It's going to take a lot of work. We're putting together that subcommittee now, as well as other people on our committee. And yeah, that's about it. We're just looking forward to hearing this meeting get jumped off.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John.
So I spent about 20 years in post-production and probably another 15 years in production, but it's very close to my heart. So when I joined John as co-chair this year, I decided to, he said, I'm going on vacation for 2 weeks. Can you come up with a topic? So knowing a lot of people in the post industry, I thought, well, you know, maybe people in production would benefit from kind of seeing where all that stuff goes and who the magicians are that help pull it together. So we've got some heavy hitters that was lined up from some of the big companies in town. So without much ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Hal Long, who's the moderator. He's a DP that came here from LA a few months ago. So Hal, why don't you bring the group up and we'll get situated and get through the introductions.
I'll move down here then. All right, so maybe we'll do some introductions here first and let everybody introduce themselves. My name is Hal Long. I am a director of photography and a director DP. I've had the privilege of living here in Atlanta and working here for a good part of the last year. Prior to that, I was in Los Angeles where I worked on a variety of projects, features, TV shows, promos for major networks and studios that everybody knows, as well as commercials, promos and branded for a variety of ad agencies, production companies, and brands. So that is my background. Adam.
My name is Adam Coggin, and I am a visual effects supervisor for COSA VFX here in Atlanta. I started out my career in games, actually in San Diego, which was cool. I started out as a generalist. I was just a journalist artist. I did matte painting and compositing, various things like that. But I always wanted to get into film, so I went to LA, and I actually got a job doing pre-production type stuff, kind of pre and post viz. I got to work at Marvel, Disney, and Warner Brothers, which was awesome because I had always kind of focused and studied for everything that happened after things were shot in VFX training. And that was the first time I actually got exposure to the production. You know, I got to see the director, talk to the director. I got to see the editors, how they worked. The first time I went on set was for Iron Man 3, which was really awesome, and that kind of feeling of this is what I created. You know, Robert Downey Jr. is actually doing what I did. And then from there, I wanted to get into like finals compositing, and so I went to COSA VFX, which is where I'm working now, but they have an LA division, and did that for a while. I did theme parks, did theme park media stuff in Orlando. Kind of been all around, but I wanted to settle down. I have 2 little kids and a wife. And we've moved 13 times throughout the course of my career, so I thought, well, we should try to settle down. And we really like Georgia. So COSA actually called me, and they said, hey, we want to open an Atlanta division, and we have all these shows that we're doing. So I took the job up here, and the rest is history. It's been a lot of fun.
Hi everyone, I'm Fatima Abdullah, Executive Producer of Primal Screen. Conversely, I've been in Georgia my whole life. Mostly on the marketing and advertising side, working in commercial, digital properties, mostly visual effects as far as VR, MR, all those immersive properties. And recently I've moved over to Primal Screen. It's been 2 years, a lot of fun. We focus on design and animation. We have a core team of about 30 in-house, 2D, 3D developers, pulling all those things together. So once the big show hits the big screen, we're doing the promotional campaigns around it.
Testing. There we go. My name is Charles Lemons. I'm a native here of Atlanta, Georgia. Grady baby, they want to call us here. I've been in the industry for 19 years now. Started out at Turner Studios. That's when that was a division at Turner, and then kind of helped Tyler Perry get the first 100 episodes of House of Pain going. And 100 episodes in 10 months was a lot going on. And from there, 2012, I kind of branched out on my own, just kind of being that nucleus, being that glue for post, as a post producer / supervisor, and I also edit, finishing, and all that type of stuff for different networks. So production companies, executive producers, we need to talk. And networks basically will hire me to manage post and to make sure everything is, you know, delivered and we're meeting milestones and things like that. So here we are. And this is a good friend.
Hello? Hello? Hi. My name is Ron Anderson, and I'm a colorist. I've always been a colorist ever since I could walk. That's almost true. My whole adult life, I've been 46 years. I had to get a job when I got married, and I went to a film lab in Detroit. And after shooting animation for a few years with them, I moved on to this exciting new video transfer to film. And I beat up a Jacques Cousteau film about 1 million times, so kind of self-trained myself. And next thing you know, I got hired by CBS Fox to do feature film transfers of films like The Man with the Golden Gun, The Spy Who Loved Me, Robert Altman films, A Wedding, all these great movies. Flight of the Phoenix, it was quite a start. But then moved to Chicago, worked for Edithal for 6 years, mostly commercial work. And I came down here in '95 to set up with CineFilm to work on the '96 Olympics. And since 2009, I've started my own thing with Colorama. And my associate colorist, Joel, is here with me. And Joel maintains the Atlanta office. And 2 months ago, I built an office at my new home up in western North Carolina with a lake in the backyard, so I prefer to work there whenever possible. But I'm here for a couple of weeks working on several shows right now. Yeah, I'm a one-trick pony. Color correction is pretty much it keeps me, you know, pretty full. Just every day is a new day. You've got new softwares, new technologies. We'll touch upon that tonight, but I'm at the tail end of the doggy, literally, you know, budget-wise and otherwise. But thank you. I appreciate being here tonight.
Good evening, I'm Scott Salomon. I'm the head of production for long form at Deluxe Atlanta. And it's a long running facility. You may remember it as Riot Atlanta, and I've been there for quite some time. Pretty much, you know, went to Georgia State University, got my film degree, and started there not long after, and have been able to evolve my path there. Editorial, motion graphics, and visual effects were my background. And it was about 7 or 8 years ago that I saw all the film work coming in and the opportunity to get into it as a dailies producer. And so I took that step, and very uncomfortable leap, which is why later I realized it was the right thing to do. And in recent years, we've continued to evolve our offering for long form, which includes visual effects and finishing color. And so continuing to raise my hand for those things as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. That's great. I'd like to start the talk tonight by putting post-production into the context of story, because that's what this is all about. And when I was in film school a few years ago, one of my mentors really stressed to me that there are 3 distinct phases to your project and your story. The first phase is the easiest and the most, sometimes the most creative, when you're writing and, you know, the world is your canvas. The second one is when you're in production and when your dream, your script meets the reality of the world, of budget constraints, location difficulties, crew and talent politics, and malfunctioning equipment, and all the rest of it. But again, here, you know, your job is to make the best project that you can and make the best story that you can. And so then when we come to post-production, after all of the pickups are shot and all the footage is in the can, we have another chance here to reimagine our projects and to take them to their highest level. Now, you may be working on a network or studio project where you need to adhere to the script and to the letter of the page. And that's a great position to be in. Or you may be on a project where the footage maybe has taken you in a new direction and it's a better direction and it's time to reimagine the script. You know, these are all great positions to be in, but a lot of it's going to depend on you having the flexibility to make these creative choices when you get to this point, because you followed a great post-production plan. Having a great plan in place will give you freedom to make creative choices and to follow some of these avenues that kind of catch your eye down the road as you get down into the production. So with that in mind, we've got this wonderful panel of post-production experts here, and let's dive into post-production. So if we can pull up the first slide. Fatima, would you mind walking us through a little bit of what each person does in the post-production role? Here you go.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Okay, so my role as an executive producer is really to meet that client at the beginning stage. Most of my experience is with working directly with networks or studio properties to build that advertising campaign, so I'll put that in this context. And so what I do at first is I kind of think about what teams we need and think about the output, the deliverable. Where is this thing going? Where does it need to live? And how many places does it need to live at once? So one thing that's changed for me is the deliverable needs to be published at once all the time, regardless of the medium. So I think that's a little bit new. So the post supervisor is very important to our team. When we have those nice healthy budgets, we usually bring that post supervisor on at the beginning so they can be analyzing the script and really lining out the independent teams that make up each of these sections and making sure we've got the right contingencies in the budget when those real life moments happen. The editor is really taking the daily footage, those decisions are made on a daily, hourly basis, logging everything, depends on how big that team needs to be. Assistant editor is probably doing a lot of that logging work and managing, working with each of the departments on set to make sure they've got everything recorded accurately. Visual effects supervisor, producer, and the team, depending on the size of your budget, those kind of might melt a little bit. If you're lucky and they're separate, they're really making sure the timeline is on track. So anything that comes up on set, anything that we can expect to change on in post, they're usually bringing that up to me, and then I'll bring that up to the client with a smile. Colorist, of course, is making everything beautiful. Quite the opposite. It's not the tail, but it really heightens the effect of the overall finishing process. Color can tell a story, does tell a story in every film or advertising campaign. Sound designer and mixer, we're not going to go into too much detail there tonight, but we all know audio, really can make a show, so we'll just leave it at that. Online editor and finish. Again, they're assembling all the major parts. That's kind of when the team begins to go back to its core functionalities. Producer, post supervisor are making sure everything's ready to hit those specs for the network. And DCP provider is really providing the end meat, making sure that hard drive makes it to where it needs to go. Is that about right, guys?
Awesome, that's great. So as a DP, I know when I go into a project, there are a lot of things that come out of that first meeting. And immediately you leave the meeting with a list of next steps that you have to take and people you have to talk to. Talk to me about what typically happens with you in a first meeting and how you then go about deciding what steps to take in terms of VFX, in terms of color, in terms of format, and the whole shebang.
Goodness. Well, the first meeting, we'll call that the discovery meeting, right? So in my world, network advertising, we're always thinking about how the long format team, what their deadlines look like, and when we're going to get assets from them, or it might be clips and animation, it's actually art assets where we're assembling, but we're really asking more questions than we receive from the client. So questions met with questions in order to hone in. So how long is this indeliverable? What's the budget? When does it need to hit the market? Because deadline for us isn't really, when it's on screen. We have to work backwards to think about when Netflix might need that. Sometimes that's a long lead. It might be 2 or 3 months for them to test and put it through their pipeline. So it's working backwards, really, to see what I can talk about with the post supervisor and when each thing can be backed in.
Awesome. Charles, you have anything to add to that?
She said it all.
Okay. Succinctly, I might add. Right? Okay, so then immediate next steps from the meeting. What would you do, Charles, what do you do typically after that first meeting?
More so, I am trying to see what is the end result before we even get started. What platform are we putting this project? Is it just for YouTube? Is it just for network television? A lot of us, we go out and buy these 5K cameras now and say, I want to look great, which is perfectly fine if the budget's there. And then we end up on 1980 by 1020 on, I think that's right. We end up on network, and when they do it, they're going to compress it even more. So sometimes I basically start with the end result in mind and what the deadlines are and what type of team we need to build around it depending on the deadline. Do we need 5 editors? Do we need 1 editor, or whatever the case may be? That's normally how I start out, and then we'll go from there to see where we're going.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful. In a typical, let's say a typical film production, what sort of lead times are you looking for?
Just all depends on the project. Sometimes you can do a series, a 10-episode series, you know, and it may be an hour episodic series, or it can be a 30 minutes episodic series. So it just all depends on what the goal is, what the project is. So I really can't really say
Okay.
that.
Great. Okay, so then, what is, I guess, in a perfect world, what are the steps that you take, and who are the people that you bring on immediately once that meeting has happened and the project's been firmed up?
Get you a good assistant editor. Someone who knows the computer, someone who knows the software, someone who is a great organizer, because if you don't start with organization in the beginning, once you get to the end, you're going to be on the phone with this guy, he's going to be fussing at you, this guy is going to be fussing at you, and it's going to cost more money, and then she's going to get it and say, hey, what happened? All because you didn't start at the beginning. So getting you a good assistant editor who understands the workflow and how to manage that media, that's one of our first things to manage.
Okay. So when should a production begin to consider and to consult their post-production supervisor?
Yeah, I want to say almost immediately. I feel like we're a little bit weighted here. Well, you know, when you're thinking about the end result and the vision of the director, typically those aren't really divorced now from post and production. The processes are so married now that your director, you know, usually has a sense of what can be done and how they can shoot economically to start budgeting and planning. So I really, you know, in a good director and a good team is really thinking about who they want to work with to begin with. So that initial meeting where you're talking before you've got funding, that's when you should be talking to post. So even when I'm working on the independent front, one thing I really urge live action directors to do is think about how you're going to be doing post and then allocating anywhere from, I don't know, 10 to 75% of the budget to post, of course. But you know, you have to really think, you know, these tools are more readily accessible and most people can, you know, use them to some ability to make their film and story sing.
Yeah, and just to add is, it's depending on the project, you may have a post supervisor or it might be a VP of post with a studio, and they can oftentimes facilitate a project in a similar way. But those might be your main points of contact, but they really have, in a lot of ways, kind of a long ramp to get into the project. There are a few things to button up during pre-production and as production does start to get moving. But naturally, it is a back-weighted position in general.
Awesome. So for, let's say, you know, a studio project or network project is one thing. For an indie project, how do you go about in the development, in the pre-production phase, go about helping to figure out if their budget is realistic, and to determine what is the appropriate budget for post, in particular for VFX, and how do you, you know, what is your process for that?
I like to think that, you know, you have the script and you have some idea of the storyboards. So for the team to look at to see how things can be accomplished. And then it's really kind of breaking off into smaller groups and saying, you know, let's blue sky, let's see what you could really use and who we can talk to get those budgets in place, and then we'll realign and put all those line items together. So maybe a locked or close to finished locked script and some kind of visual representation maybe of how that's going to be put together.
Copy that. What is your first step when you receive a script and you're breaking that down?
Oh, you're talking just on indie or like even pro?
Give us an A and B.
All right. Well, I mean, the first thing I do when I'm brought on board is to give a more granular bid as to what the VFX are going to be. So I'll have a script before me, or sometimes I'm even there before the script is still in progress, and I'll do a breakdown, which basically, a lot of times even the people who are writing it don't understand that what they're making is a visual effect. Like if somebody says, you know, people are driving through the mountains or something, and we're shooting it in Atlanta, well, what is that? So I highlight, I annotate that we have a production meeting or a concept meeting, in which case I'll say, hey, what is this? Are we relocating to shoot this? Are we going to do a green screen? Or are we going to do like LED panels, rear projection? And then once I get all those answers, I hand that then to my colleagues, and they kind of have a discussion on what are we going to cut, what can we modify, and a lot of times it's not a discussion of what can we absolutely eliminate. It's okay if we have an effect, maybe we can limit the shots, or maybe we can have an establishing and show that people are driving in the mountains, and then you do a formats process afterwards. There's a lot of ways that I can help kind of offer suggestions on how to streamline or make it more affordable. And in that case, I actually go and I supervise the shoot, make sure that we actually shoot it that way.
Awesome. I'm kind of fond of cameras and acquiring images. Talk to me about why choosing a camera for a project is more than just saying, hey, let's get the most popular camera that's out there today. What other considerations might you have in post?
I mean, iPhone does a really good job nowadays.
I would say data count is huge. As the resolution's getting larger, so are those images and the data that accompanies it. Of course, when you're talking about digital capture versus film capture, so data's huge, and it determines a lot about cost downstream. Everything from how much you've got to archive to what size are you mastering and how big are the VFX plates going to be delivered. So the camera has a lot to do with image, but set aside that, the data rates that we're seeing are massive with all the footage coming in.
So things are getting bigger. We're with the advent of HDR, which we'll touch upon a little bit. Everybody's going to be wanting to work from original camera footage, whether it be ACES, color space, or some other, but you're dealing with bigger and bigger files. So yeah, file management is going to be something, a real consideration. And so you have to, if it's a lower budget film, maybe you're not going to be selling it to Netflix or YouTube or somebody, and it has a totally different market. And you're going to transfer MXF files for the show, and you don't have to worry about any of that. But as the HDR market comes over, it's already been going about 3 years, and there's no stopping it. You're not going to want to shoot with an 8-bit camera. Everybody's going to have to step up for it to look good in HDR. Data is a consideration too.
Well, beyond HDR, there are a lot of other considerations. You mentioned not shooting certain projects for Netflix or Amazon or some of the other studios on certain cameras. Can you talk to me a little bit about what some of those network requirements are looking like today?
Sure, and to add to that, then to answer your question, I would say something that we deal with in post is formats and compatibility. Sometimes, we work with Avid Media Composer, Final Cut, Premiere. I think Premiere just come out, can handle anything. But then sometimes Avid can be a little iffy. You buy this camera, it gives you a beautiful image, and then I'm going to bring it into Avid, and it's like I can't see it. Like, what's going on? So now you got to figure out what plugins you got to use. You got to figure out how you can make your software compatible so it can read the actual image, the data that it has going on. And then some of the network deliverables that they want. We finally are getting away from HD cam, actual tapes, believe it or not. But a lot of Discover, I think, wanted HD cam. TV One was another network that wanted HD cam, which are all just HD formats, 1080, 1920 by 1080 formats. But now when we get into the digital world, a lot of people are wanting MXF files and ProRes files, which are just high-res, QuickTime, stuff like that that you can stick out. And now I'm working on a show now out of Utah. They're wanting the 4K files. So that's why I say you gotta be careful on how you start the process, because if you didn't start it right, to go all the way back to your 4K files will be a mess, having to go back in and possibly re-edit your whole sequence frame by frame. So it just depends on what the network is wanting and where they're going to stick it out to. Netflix is the same way. They want your 4K files if you have them, if that's what you're shooting with. When you deliver, you have to stick out a 4K image. So.
Right, and beyond a 4K image, all of these networks have specific requirements in terms of camera bit rate and resolution. And Netflix even has like a whole little diorama where they'll spin a pinwheel and shine lights into the camera just to see how the image is handled. But if you look on their websites and do a little bit of research, you can find the image requirements for Netflix, for Amazon, for HBO, for Discovery, for pretty much every network that's out there. They have a list of acceptable cameras for A camera, for B camera. How much can a non-approved camera be in your film? Is it 5%, 10%, 15%? All of those kinds of things. Do you have anything to add to that?
I was going to say that one of the fun parts of the process is early on when a DP is looking at a variety of cameras, and they'll do what we call a bake-off, which is shoot tests with every camera, put it in a room, keep all the variables the same, and toggle between the different cameras, and then we'll have a session, and look at the variables. I was, going to ask, what are the specific things that you might be looking for during that test?
For me, during that test, obviously, the first and foremost is getting either my actors in there or people who are similar in facial structure, skin tone to my actors, see how the camera responds to the skin tones, how they color up. Once we get them into the color suite, beyond that, what are the VFX requirements? What would VFX want for if we had any special needs there? Is it a global shutter? Is it a rolling shutter? How much movement are we going to be having? And then, beyond that, form factor is always a big thing. If it's an action and there's going to be an action piece and there's going to be a lot of handheld, you're probably going to want to have a smaller camera, or at least have a compatible smaller camera to your main camera that can be carried around in a small handheld configuration or mounted in really cool places. So you're not having to go outside of one camera profile and one camera look to get those kinds of shots. All right, so since we're talking about pre-production, we're just kind of finishing up pre-production. Let's talk briefly about archive, because a lot of people wait till the end to think about this. And why is that a bad idea?
Well, no, and having a lot of dailies experience, the main reason you can't is when you're shooting on a digital capture and you're using mags as your capture medium. The production may have some of their own mags, and the studio may provide a handful of mags or the money for it, or what have you. You've got a stack of mags, and once you've shot, let's say 8 to 12 mags for the day, those get quarantined. The dailies are copied to, like a shuttle drive comes to our facility where we copy everything, process the dailies overnight, and we have to lay that material to archive, to LTO tape, and that becomes your digital negative. And what our best practice recommendation is that you do not recycle those mags until after the LTO has been completely archived and verified, meaning archived, the data is written to the tape, but the verification process is additional time to make sure, checking back, it's like a checksum to check back and ensure that all the files that you said were supposed to go to the tape did actually land on the tape. And so most studios will also say, no, you cannot release those mags until the archive is complete, which is understandable. You need to know that the footage is backed up before you wipe that mag. So that's the main reason when it comes to large format digital capture, and they're shooting day after day and sending a ton of footage. So that's sort of the bigger case scenario. If it's a smaller production and they're not as interested in or have the need for LTO backups, you do need to have some redundancy, and we're always big fans of redundancy. Additional copy on set, and then if you're not going to do LTOs, some other copy somewhere else, and you want to have separation just in case of
yeah, absolutely.
events.
On my sets, typically, we'll make those 2 copies, and one will go to post where it's either backed up to LTO, or it's ingested from there, and then the drive will be preserved until everything is later backed up. So from my side, from the production side, the media wrangler, the media manager, DIT, person who handles the mags and transfers them to hard drive, has a really interesting position, because in a lot of ways they're almost like an assistant editor. They're looking at the footage, they're bringing it in, they're running out to me if they spot anything that looks wrong or the way it shouldn't be in the footage or in the shot itself, what happens within the frame. And sometimes they're even doing quick sync of the audio. I love it when that person, the media manager or DIT, is talking all the time with the assistant editor, and that there's tons of dialogue back and forth from post to production. What are your guys' thoughts?
Agree.
Yeah.
All right.
I also like it when the script supervisor or producer is in on those conversations, or at least catching some of the small details to hear what the DP wants to capture, some nuances in those frames. Because in the commercial world, you have to move really fast. And so to be able to pull a select when you need it, and when the client wants to see an option, or DP wants to see an option, or director wants to see an option, those human redundancies can't be really replaced yet.
And I agree with both and what he said. And if you can't afford the LTO route, you still need to figure out how we're going to store our footage on a main drive and a backup drive. That's like a must. I just talked to someone the other day, and they want me to do a project. I said, well, did you back your footage up? Oh yeah, I gotta go and get a hard drive. Yeah, I won't touch your project until I know that it is backed up, because if anything could happen, I mean, you can plug it up and it'll get a fry, anything, and I've experienced it. So yeah, you want to make sure that your footage is backed up into 2 places at all times.
Okay, so loaded question here. What is wrong with the fix it in post?
Oh boy, money. How about that?
Yeah.
Best case scenario, money.
Fixed in post equals money that you probably don't have.
That's right.
And
Or don't want to spend on that?
yeah, I mean, the truth of the matter is I work because I have to take care of my family just like everyone else. And if I'm at work an extra day, I expect to get paid for that, just like everyone else. And you're fixing it in post when you really could have fixed it in production. You could have called this guy and he would have saved you probably money on that shot and money in post trying to fix it.
That's actually one of my jobs.
Yeah.
Because you know how often I hear a DP say, hey Adam, can you paint that out? And it's like some, I don't know, something in the background that he doesn't like. And I'll say, well, can we just, move the camera over and rotate over a little bit? Ah, sure. And then there it's fixed. And then now they don't have to, and sometimes, I will say on the reverse side, I've been on set where they really are gonna miss their day if they don't get this thing. Some practical effect fails and they need to re-rig it or whatever. And that's an opportunity that VFX can save the production a lot of money, because they can say, hey guys, we'll do it. And then they don't have to pay to get another day, second unit day or whatever. So yeah, it is a good tool, but what's the term? Every solution's a hammer, then every problem's a nail. So yeah, if you say that once yes, you have to be ready to say no a lot. So.
Right. And those breakdowns that we talked about earlier, I think they're so enlightening for the front end team to hear, because most often than not, we're all creative people, so you might not have thought about the way to capture that. So you're getting more new ideas on how to capture and how to be smarter, so you're not dipping into that contingency right away.
I have a tiny bit of production experience, and I mean tiny, and mostly in post, we, whether it's something that became a VFX shot or some issue, You know, with the capture, it's easy from the post room to kind of complain, but when you're not on set on the day, you know, it can be a mess, and we try to make order of that mess, and sometimes that is the fix it in post mentality.
That's why I'm in animation.
Yeah. Full control over it. Right.
You know, and sometimes it can be our production people who are just sometimes are a little lazy, you know. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Sorry, but sometimes your audio guy and your actual DP or camera guy don't talk, and their formats are off. So now we're in post trying to take an extra time when she's calling or the EP's calling, hey, when can I see the dailies? Well, you gotta wait a second, because now we gotta convert some files in order for us to even sync up audio, because your audio person shot in 23 and your video people shot in 59. So now we gotta figure this whole thing out, when it could have just been not fixed in post and fixed now.
So I guess to sum up, every time you hear those words,
it makes
you know,
us
fix it in
cringe.
post, what are you going to give up to do that? Right? Because you're going to have to spend money on it. Where's that money coming from, right?
That's true.
Yeah. So Adam, since we just were talking about that, talk to us a little bit about what your process is on set, and maybe why the VFX supervisor should be brought in into production and be there all the time on some productions, or maybe just consulting for other ones.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier that I should be there from the beginning in order to catch things that maybe they can't afford, obviously. But there's other, I can offer creative suggestions, or, I mean, there was an indie project I worked on where luckily they brought me on early, and they had this shot they wanted to do with this girl that was going to change into an angel, and they wanted her to fly away, and it was this whole thing. And it's expensive because they couldn't afford the wire work, but they wanted a CG angel, you know, flying through the air with the wings and everything. And I was like, well, I don't think you can do that, but you could have one shot where maybe her eyes start to change color, her hair starts to change color, the wings come up, and then you cut out, and you have a more creative ending. And they're like, oh, that's a good idea. And so when I supervised that shoot, I was there to facilitate that and make sure that I was getting what they needed to make sure that it didn't explode into something. Because very quickly, just shooting coverage of something that's a VFX scene, unbeknownst to them, they could be getting all these things that are going to be, that's VFX, this is VFX, and just a little bit of corralling it's both one of the most joyful things in my job, to know at the end of the day, yes, I did a really good job, but it's also some of the most stressful stuff to deal with, knowing that these people are going to be like, who is this guy that shot this? Like, what? So, and I've been one of those artists who've been like, who was responsible for this?
Yeah, so what you're saying is you solved it by just saying, hey, let's let the audience, let their imaginations do some of the work.
Right.
Right. So, you know, you go back to what Spielberg did on Jaws. I mean, same thing. That, you know, you got a bad shark. Let's not show him that much, and people imagine he's really bad. So, Scott and Ron, let's talk a little bit about your involvement during production. And Scott, let's start with you in terms of what is your role in terms of viewing, assessing the footage, and communicating with production?
On the daily side, the truth is that during production, we don't really want to be seen or heard, and we kind of want to be forgotten about. Is the unfortunate truth. Now, we're not off the radar. We're sending all of our notifications. When the footage arrives and hits the door, we send a notification. When the dailies colorist is reviewing all the material, they're sending out 2 notifications, one directly to the DP with more kind of insider notes, and then another notification that these are all the camera rolls that were received, and we can confirm that these are the sound rolls received and all that. Anyway, we've got a number of communications that go out, and ideally, those just keep going out, and we don't have to raise any red flags, but depending on what that red flag might be when they hit, you choose your path wisely about who it is that you're reaching out to, if it's the DP or if it's the studio contact. And ideally you can kind of keep things you escalate in a orderly fashion. So that is on the daily side, where we're kind of that hub between production, editorial. We're giving materials to editorial all the time, and the studio or network.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about the role of LUTs and lookup tables during production, and what's the upside and downside of using stronger LUTs for production.
Well, in my experience, they're oftentimes putting LUTs on set to take a look. I mean, they're something to be taken on and off. They're not permanently burned into the thing. But early on, I'll oftentimes have a conversation with the VP about things in general. We're going for a period look, but we don't want sepia. Got any ideas, that sort of thing. Typically, I don't do dailies anymore. When I was with City Film, I did quite a bit of them. And in fact, the last dailies projects I worked on, I was freelancing at Crawford here in town when they were still here. And I worked on Hidden Figures and Gifted. And Hidden Figures had a very astute DP, Mandy Walker, who shot the movie Australia. Just a remarkable woman, but I was in contact with her daily, whether it was on the phone or texting, and she'd see a shot after I did the dailies, and could we make that a half a stop darker? Yes, ma'am. So I'd be redoing things for a half a stop, which it's a daily, it's okay. So typically those LUTs are not really applied to it, only for a comfort factor. When DIT and digital stuff first came over from film, actually the last thing the director really wanted to see was a DIT on set. It's like, who is this guy? What's he doing with my footage? Does he know what he's doing? It was an adversarial relationship in the beginning, and now I think that's all, they expect somebody there that does a good job and shows them and whatnot. And gives them a comfort factor that, okay, this is where my exposure should be for this shot, and this is what we can do with it. And so it's all good. So typically, I'm not running into it anymore.
Got it. Yeah, from my side, the power of a LUT or having a DIT on set is that, especially on a commercial job, you can make a very convincing case to the client right then and there, and they can sign off on what you're shooting. The downside, I feel, of relying too heavily on LUTs is that people go after them out of the gate, particularly with today's tendency with a lot of shows are shot darker. And that's not necessarily because they didn't expose the image well, it's because they finished it that way.
Well, I can say this, I've had experiences where LUTs, they're not foolproof. I've worked on some Panasonic footage one time, and the Panasonic LUT for that camera put artifact anytime you had a bright cyan color. It was like, what is that? Well, that's from their LUT. So you color it regularly, there's no artifacts in it. So I mean, they're not foolproof.
It's true, and I'm no image scientist, but sometimes you can be kind of fighting against the LUT, where the LUT puts some sort of color curve on the image, and you're like pushing against it and having a difficult time.
So, I was just about to say that. For those who don't know what a LUT is, it's called a lookup table, and so essentially what it means is that when we're acquiring in camera, we're acquiring raw data, and the LUT puts a look onto that. And so, like we've talked about, in its perfect use, it creates a beautiful image that everybody loves and that they sign off on. But sometimes the LUT can convince people that they should expose too bright or too low, and it doesn't always work to their advantage. In terms of who would you like to have on set, minimum, in terms of a minimum crew or post-production, if you're not editing during production, do you want to have an AE already on staff who's bringing things in and doing assemblies? How do you approach it?
Yeah, for those, short form jobs, like commercial, minimum, let's go back to our list here. On our side, for animation, we're usually on the supervising side, so we do a lot of live action integration. At a studio like ours, you're gonna send your director out there who would serve as the set producer, set supervisor. So if I can, I get my director out there to make sure whatever we get back is gonna work. Assistant editor, I would say, is a luxury, and we're usually working with a production shop in tandem. So if they can provide that, we absolutely go for it. And so we can get the logs, we can pretty much get on the plane with everything that we need. VFX supervisor, again, we kind of toggle the line between that. If it's a nice healthy budget, we do both. And I would say that's pretty much all we need. Sometimes I'll go out on set or send a producer out on set because these commercial jobs can be so run and gun that a lot of these details haven't been worked out. So you may need to do some finagling right when you're on set.
Got it. Very good. Adam, how can the camera department best support VFX? What considerations can they take into account?
Camera department's my best friend. DP's my best friend on set because everything they capture we have to use directly. And so, I mean, getting all the camera information, like all of it. There's all this technical stuff we have to record on set. And I talk to the camera people a lot about what type of camera is this, what kind of type of camera is on every single body so that we know the sensor back, and there's all this math we have to use with the lenses in order to undistort it so that we can track the shots. And so a DP can make my life either a living hell or really great, because a DP that's willing to accommodate me can be like, hey Adam, we can overcrank this, so we can give you extra resolution, or maybe I'll shoot this raw on that day because we need to key the sky. There's a lot of things that they can help with. If they fight me, then maybe I don't get what I need, and we have to pay for it.
And you fix it in post then,
Fix it
right?
in post. How that works.
Real quick, we don't have a microphone that we'll be passing around, so if anyone has questions that they already know they'd like to ask, just raise your hand and Michael will give you a little note card and we'll write it down and then we'll take them up here. Ron, how can camera and production best support you?
Well, typically, I'm, as I say, I'm at the tail end of all the stuff that goes on. People have been working with this project for sometimes years. And so I have to do all my work in a week or two, or a day sometimes. A weekend. A lot of weekends. Any dialogue I can have with them about the look that they're going for, what the piece is about, what they're trying to impart. There's a lot of creative decisions that can really be enhanced in color correction. And so, time permits, I can take a look at some of the footage, send out some examples, send out some live video, or at least some stills. Again, is this what you're looking for? We can go this way, that way. And that really saves a lot of time, rather than going through a film and somebody looks at the finished film and says, it's not at all what we wanted.
Right.
But it's just a dialogue, open communication, and being open to have that, I know, and especially when everybody's on set. I mean, how many people are on set? 150 sometimes. I mean, there's not much time to talk to the colorist, so
Yeah.
It is helpful.
VFX and color both have a lot of powerful tools at their disposal. Sometimes, you can do some relighting work, you can do some makeup and some smoothing. Fatima, how do you begin the process of deciding what would go to VFX and what would be fixed in color? And then Adam and Ron, what is your step in the process?
Well, I'll kind of cheat here. It's lucky for us, again, because we're design and animation. So we're really setting what those art assets need to be up front. When we take a look at that VFX breakdown, when we're deciding what can be a CG model or what can be done as a 3D model. And so we can get the timeline going on that production, because you don't need to wait until the end to start that visual effects process. if it has to be fixed, I think what you're really relying on is the production department, the DP, to know what shots they want to fix once they're on set. So that's where I keep talking about that little contingency. Those fixes, we know we can be flexible in post, so we try not to say, well, you can't not fix it. But you have an expectation of what you can go either way.
Well, we've done numerous makeup tests for big stars. I mean, they try half a dozen different kind of makeups, I don't know, sometimes more, and they want to see what that looks like for shooting film. And it really helps them lock it in for the shoot. So, I mean, there are some things of that nature, just to hone in on the particular, because all these different place stones that we got, and touching upon HDR briefly, again, we might get there, but you've got a lot more tonalities with HDR.
Yeah, and the bake-off we talked about earlier can happen across every department, right? So that first week of wardrobe fittings, of bake-up tests, of, how are we gonna pre-light the set? That's kind of when that, all departments are working to see what they need to do to not fix it in post.
Yeah, and I would say for like advanced blemish removal, that's something that we do, or like somebody gets a bug bite, and it can be removed.
Me too.
Yeah. But it's amazing what we can do. Like sometimes we even go as far as like for de-aging, we'll do facial reconstruction and rewrap it on their face. It's pretty cool what we can do.
Okay. Really quickly, because I do want to get to Ron's HDR slides. Talk to me real quickly about what is your preferred way of working, Adam and Ron, in terms of file formats. What are some of the common mistakes you see when you receive footage, from editorial, and how does it arrive to you perfectly?
You want me to go first?
Go ahead.
So VFX, because we need to have the absolute utmost integrity on our images, we deliver it back the same way that we got it, but we do a lot of manipulation while we have the image. So we want it at the fullest, rawest, highest quality state that we can get it. And sometimes if cameras shoot raw, like I've worked with raw red footage, it's a tremendous amount of color range. It's a lot of colors. And so we get all that information, which is typically it's called an EXR format. We work up, it's called linear color space, which means we don't mess with the colors at all. We do all of our visual effects, and then more and more now, kind of getting in the HDR, we'll just hand that directly into color. So they have all that information. Sometimes if we don't work that way, like we'll just get like a ProRes or something, or H.264 on indie projects. And it's really hard to like pull green screens, because there's a lot of like artifacting that goes on in there. And so basically the better the source, the better the VFX can be.
For me, they say it's always better to work from the original camera source in color. Sometimes that's not possible with lower budget films. They just don't have the resources to stay in 4K or under the 6K and 8K footages now. They just don't have the resources for that. So the biggest thing I would say with the raw footage is that's why your assistant editors are so important. Not to change the names or time codes of anything in your transcoding for editorial. I mean, because if the names are changed on any of the camera files or time codes, that doesn't equate when I get an AAF or XML to bring it into resolve color correction. It will not link up with the original camera footage any longer. And as Charles was saying, you have to sit there and re-edit the film and link every shot by hand. It's a nightmare to go that way. So that's really an important thing from working on the original camera footage as much as you possibly can. It keeps it pristine, and you have the most color bandwidth to work with. And what that means is you can reach into the color negative.
Yep.
It's like, I don't know if you know film where they would have a little deeper negative, they overexpose it, they have a stop just to make it a little denser and almost like 3D. You can reach into the negative. The same thing is true with digital photography. You can reach in a little more and it gives you more chutzpah.
Yeah. I once shot a project and I thought it went great. And then when I saw the final product, I politely asked the producer what was the coloring process. And so they said they took the read our 3D files that we shot, which were 6K, and they transferred them to HD ProRes, and then they colored from that. And so the difference in what's available to the colorist between a raw file and any of the intermediate formats like ProRes, it's tremendous. And so the greatest service you can do to the image on your project is to try to always stick with those raw files, for sure. We've had so many good questions here that we're kind of starting to bump up against our time at the end. But I wanted, Ron brought some slides here for color, to talk about color space real quick. And I think they'll be illustrative for people who are finishing projects that aren't just for video, but are also for digital cinema and 4K.
Right, and these two slides are pretty much showing the same thing, but the outer edge of what you're seeing, that whole color bulb, is pretty much what the human eye can see, okay? And the inner triangle, the very smallest one, is what we've been transferring for years in Rec 709. That's what most people are watching on television. And the next one, P3, that's digital cinema. It show a little more. And the biggest triangle is HDR, high dynamic range. And basically, from a creative standpoint, if you're in Rec 709, you might have, I'm putting it simply, you might have, I don't know, say 6 crayons in your crayon box. And you go to P3, you might have 26 crayons in your crayon box. You go to HDR and you've got 1,000 crayons in your crayon box. And there's so many more levels, and I'll show you that on the next slide, please. It's a gamma, yeah, the gammas. So you'll see that the Rec 709, it's not just how bright it is, but how deep it is, how many more gamma and levels you've got. And in Rec 709, you might have a million different levels of brightness and gammas and luminance levels, and HDR, you might have 68 million of them. I mean, it's just phenomenal how many more colors pop out. The basic brightness difference that they're touting, we're in standard HD, we're looking on our monitors a brightness level that's measured in a unit called nits, N-I-T-S. And we're all looking at basically 100 nits, all our home TVs and everything, 100 nits of brightness. And HDR goes up to 1,000 nits, 2,000 nits. The Dolby Vision standard is 10,000 nits. We don't have any monitors that show that yet. And they also, those monitors for color grading are very expensive, 35,000, 45,000, and then they're not going to be applicable in 3 years. I don't know. So there's the costs are going to be coming down as this becomes invasive. But it's like I equate this change, this in technology. It's remarkable because you'll see all these things you never saw before because of all the tonalities. You know, a skin tone that you might have one orange crayon to work with. Now you've got 100, 200 orange crayons. Okay, well, where do you want our skin tone? The brightness of a, say, 1,000 nit monitor doesn't mean that this picture is just going to be so bright that you can't stare at it. Oh my God, it's too bright. It's like looking out a window. It's like your human eye. It's getting closer to what the human eye can see. Even though the levels of stops in the camera, I mean, the human eye can see 24 stops, okay? But you can only see 12 stops at a time, depending on where your pupils are. If you're in a bright room, you're seeing the brighter 12 stops. If you're going into a dark room, all of a sudden, you're seeing 12 stops in a dark room. And so when you're doing HDR in a setting like this, these lights are probably going to pop up to peak, 800, 900 nits maybe, where the audience might be 60, 70 nits. So that, the relative brightness of things is going to be kind of the same, right? But it's going to have so much more depth because of that extra gamma that you have.
Exactly, and so you say that the human eye can see 12 stops, whereas we're working today with cameras that are in the 13 to 16. Some of them are claiming even more than 16 stops of latitude. They're getting very equivalent in terms of the latitude from dark to light that the human eye sees.
Well, I think what's going on with this is, if you look back when standard HD came in over standard def, that took 3 or 4 years for everybody to embrace it and whatnot, and afford the cameras and whatnot. And this is similar to that. I mean, this is a jump that everybody's going to make.
Awesome. If you have any more questions on HDR, please don't hesitate to ask after the talk. We've got a bunch of questions from the audience here, and they are very spot on. So, Adam, first question for you: how do you get a VFX budget when you're in pre-development on a sci-fi production?
On a sci-fi production, like we don't know what we're going to have yet. Does anybody can expand on that?
Let's assume that you have a script, and the script is being written. What is your process when you, in 30 seconds or so, what is your process for breaking that down?
So, because I've done the work, I know how long it takes to do the tasks that are described. So if it says a giant ship, or some aliens or something, I can say, okay, well, that giant ship can take 10 modelers, or 5 modelers and 2 texture artists, and I can kind of bid that out as far as hours, and then I can come up with a rough estimate and say, okay, this is how much man-hour it's going to take, and come up with a pretty close estimate of how much it'll be.
Awesome. Ron has a question here. How much freedom do you have in determining the colors should be on a given film? And is it addressed in the development stage or at the back end? Where's Ron? Ron's no longer here. Okay. There are a lot of choices that are made in terms of color with the director, production designer, the director of photography. Everybody's working in harmony to pick a color palette, and hopefully that translates all the way through to the final color, which Ron would be doing. And that all of that information had been given to him, so he knows the palette and the tonality that everybody was going after. So ideally, your colors are chosen at the top of your production before you start, so that you've planned and have a structure for how the colors might even evolve through the show. And then ultimately, the final color grade will enhance that and support that theme that you've developed during production. Charles, who determines what gets cut? Does this happen in post-production, and by whom?
The check writer.
Amen, brother.
Normally, the producers, it goes in phases. When you get the footage in, and you first do your editor's cut. Depending on the project, you take a week or 2 weeks, and you cut. You do your cut based off of the script, if there is one, or if you're just freelancing creativity, you do it based off of your heart. And you send that, if there is a director involved, you'll send it to a director's cut, and the union understands this whole thing. Some shows it's mandatory that the director gets his due diligence at the cut. And then from there it goes to the producers, then to the EPs, and it just keeps going up and up and up. So that's how that works.
Awesome, thank you. This question: how do you make sure the monitors are calibrated the same for all viewers and decision makers, and will coloring show differently on different viewing mediums? This is a great question. This is a really good question, because every editor at various stages in their career has finished a project, colored it, and then found out that it looks nothing like what they thought it did once it got to other people's screens. So I know that on the production side, I tend to use what are called calibrated monitors. So they have somebody who comes out and they put a sensor so they can calibrate the colors on the monitor so that they're 100% accurate. Now, that doesn't mean that every calibrated monitor is going to look exactly the same, but hopefully the decision makers are all using ones that are close enough in terms of how they're calibrated and the type of monitor they are. An OLED's not going to look like an LCD. A $35,000 color grading, 300 monitor is not going to look the same as my Flanders Scientific, but they both look great and serve their function very well. Do you have anything to add to that? How do you guys?
My Flanders Scientific will look exactly like this.
Perfect.
I just want to add that you can buy these little contraptions to look at your monitor. They don't cost that much. So even on indie productions, you can calibrate your own monitors.
At the beginning of a production, we'll get a DP monitor and a DIT monitor, usually like 2 monitors. So there might be 3 monitors that we get. Those are the most color critical viewing monitors on a production. Of course, you want the DP and their DIT to be looking at something that is representative of not only continuity between the 2 of them, but also continuity with what the dailies colorist is going to see, what the DI colorist is going to see down the road as well. So we have, again, I'm not an image scientist, but we've got target values for color and brightness that we aim for when we're calibrating, and we use a scope to do so, and we're in there, messing with the settings. When I say we, I don't mean me, because I don't have the capability, but the team members that have that knowledge will calibrate the monitors to ensure that they're in spec with what we see and with what the finishing facility sees as well.
Okay, awesome. Process. I've had monitors that go through a 7 or 8 hour calibration, 5,000 measurements.
Yeah, and it's an expensive process when you get a proper calibration. So we're at the end of our time, but I have one last question here from somebody who is still angry about why the final Game of Thrones episodes were so dark, and they want to know, was that because of color, or was that what effect did color have on the final look? I can assure you that the camera team exposed everything properly. That's all I'm going to say. Somebody had a preference for that look.
It's a Starbucks coffee cup.
So that's all the time we have, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out. I don't believe we have any industry announcements today, so we are adjourned, and thank you for coming out and hold on.
I just wanted to know, I see some new faces. Who is new to coming to our meetings? Is there anybody here? Great. What I'd love to say is thank you so much for coming. They had an awesome panel. It was completely captivating for me, who learned what a LUT was, and believe me, I've never heard that. But I also would ask you guys to seriously think about joining the organization. As you heard tonight, as Peter said, we're going to face some challenges to our tax incentive. There's some other legislative things that we'll be looking at this year. And this is a grassroots organization. It needs the support of everybody in this room to both write your legislator, but I know we're not able to take memberships, but you can do that online. And we would be very grateful to have your support and your participation. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more announcement. Michael?
Yeah. We decided, because we knew this would go along, we had a lot of pros in the room and probably a lot more questions, so we've decided to go down to the Corner Tavern. It's about 2 miles away. It's in Hapeville. It's you go straight down the access road, like you're going back to Atlanta, get off on Central Avenue, which should be the next exit, really before you get back on the interstate, and you go about a half a mile west. It's called the Corner Tavern, 575 Central Avenue, but we're just going to go hang out for a while. I hope most of our people can join us, but you're certainly welcome, because the union guys want us to get out of here.
And thank you,
Also,
Michael,
if you want to join tonight, our membership person is over there, and she has a little square, and she can take your payment. Good night.